So this week we'll be looking at mentorship and discipleship. I want to mention that we don't want to cover that over last week. Stated the rest of lessons that I wanted to do. This will be one of them. As an important lesson, well, all the lessons are important, but when I say it's important, you see how some of the lessons I would have or I went over some of the topics and how some of them kind of pour into this one. Right, and I guess I'll let you be able to glean some of that if you remember the lessons that we're not covered over the past 6 weeks, 5 weeks. You see that some of them will actually point it without even mentioning it if you really was following. So looking at your new topics, or actually the areas we'll be looking at in mentorship and discipleship, which is mentorship and discipleship in scripture, the importance of mentorship and discipleship in the church is what I want to expound on a bit. That second topic. That second part rather, and the third part is the benefits of mentorship and discipleship. Please try and bear with me the floor, right? I apologize. I guess a quick review. As always, we look at the importance of women, or what the Bible says about women in leadership roles. Women are seen in the church and in foundational roles. The scripture we look at is 1 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 11 to 12. We look at the terminology of egalitarianism as well. And we look at lesson 2 was spiritual burnout. The lesson 3 was addressing spiritual burnout, and important part of that aspect was the spouse's responsibility as well as the support that you would get from members of the church. And some of the negative effects of or the consequences rather of spiritual burnout. Lesson 4 was working in the ministry, and we also looked at the 80-20 principle and how the 80-20 principle can be countered. One of the scriptures, a couple of the scriptures that I used. Then we'll also look at working in your ministry. That was lesson 4. Let's go over it quickly. And last week we would have covered handling criticism and rejection in ministry. And then deal with the 3 areas that we look at: reality of criticism and rejection, the 2 phases of criticism and rejection, and growth as part of criticism. Right, and then we also look at some of the reasons as to why persons may avoid getting involved in ministry. Some will be afraid of the critique. Some may feel like they're not biblically sound enough. I had that concern as well before when I first started my first Bible class lesson, but here we are. Right, so you can't let these things stop us from doing the work of God. Right. Let's look at anxiety, and next big one. One that would stop us from wanting to get involved or get in front of crowds, which shouldn't be a problem for a Christian who's involved in ministry. You should be working your way towards getting closer towards speaking to persons. Right? Even if it's like crowds, starting in small groups, because everything works its way up towards developing and being a stronger Christian and being more grounded or doing more of the work that you're required to do. And then finally, fear of judgment or failure. Another one that's a compounding one, I should say. All right, so going back into it. All right, so we're first looking at the definition of mentorship. All right, so I'll just read it quickly. Mentorship is a relationship in which a more experienced believer, which is the mentor, guides, advises, and supports a less experienced believer, which is the mentee, in spiritual growth, ministry, and life decisions. Very important component, very important role to play. The purpose is to offer wisdom, accountability, and encouragement based on experience and biblical principles. And I'm just mention one part of that. I think this is, within looking through the definitions, is one of the things that I noticed that they didn't actually list, as an observation of myself, for myself rather, is that sometimes a mentor, you can be a mentor simply by your characteristics, right? people looking to emulate certain characteristics or qualities from you as a Christian. So even if you are directly playing a role towards the individual, just based on how you live, and even if it's not just for Christian brethren, but also people on the outside, people who aren't in the faith, just looking at the way that you live, you can be a mentor to them, and you could also guide them, or you could use the opportunity to guide them towards Christ. Right. Moving on to the other point, mentorship focuses on personal and professional spiritual development, helping someone grow into maturity and purpose. I kind of along the lines of what is mentioned there. Discipleship definition. I'll go a little further into that discipleship in a bit. Another term that I'm not familiar with, but we'll see. I'll discuss it a little further. So this is the intentional process of helping someone follow Jesus Christ more closely. Sorry. Becoming more like him in character, faith, and obedience. The purpose is to form Christ-like believers who live out the teachings of Jesus Christ and reproduce others who do the same. Also, that's another very important quality, or another important term actually. And when I look at the same term of discipleship, if you look at the note at the bottom, I didn't find anything in the Bible as an English language concept and is generally used to describe the concept of being a learner or a follower. Right, so in terms of familiarity with using the actual discipleship term, the research or what I would have found that it is not something that it is not found in the Bible, right? It's really a term that was brought about afterward. How much it ties into our faith or belief, I'm not really certain, but we will stick to the concept of the learner or the follower. Right? That's generally what it means. And then we look at the word disciple, however, the word disciple, however, is found many times in Gospels and in Acts, which refers to followers of Jesus and other teachers. So, the root word of discipleship would be disciple. I just want to stop sharing for a second. I just remember at any point you are free to stop me, make interjections, mention anything that you would have observed or anything that you would feel like is worth mentioning towards or adding towards part of the lesson. I just want to make sure I mention that part. I just want to share again. Sorry about it. Don't mind the coughing and all that. Nothing going to stop all. Right, so it's like a good part I want to look at that. I love the way that it came about, or the way that it was put across, and then I would have pulled out some information from it and see how it applies to us. So I get further along into how it applies to us after. So the Great Commission is found in Matthew chapter 28, verse 19 to 20. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, of the Son, of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. Very important in terms of the role that they play. So looking at that in terms of ministry, we look at so many different avenues of ministry thus far, right? But the fact of the important part of this area of ministry is getting people involved or growing them into in terms of the terminology for discipleship, in terms of loving Christ or being more Christ-like. And mentorship is guiding them or nurturing them to keep on, to grow out of. Right? And that growth is being there for them physically, guiding them spiritually, and guiding them biblically as well. So one of the some of the biblical examples would have been Moses and Joshua, Exodus chapter 24 verse 13, Numbers chapter 27, 18 to 23. And this speaks about leadership training through example and empowerment. And then we have the other examples that would have been using throughout the lessons, which is Paul and Timothy. About how Paul had a great relationship with Timothy in the sense that he would have put him basically like his child. I even can remember the term. I can't recall the exact term right now, but it's a loving relationship that he had with him. So we are so proud of the way that he has brought up. And he mentioned that when he spoke about the way that Lois and Eunice, his mother and grandmother, would have raised them. and that he continues to do the work of God even at such a young age. Right? One of the scriptures that we look at, if you want, you can turn to it, is 2 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 2. 2 Timothy 2 and verse 2. Sorry, I read it quickly. The things you have heard from me, entrust to reliable people who will also be qualified to teach others. Right, that's 2 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 2. Another examples of discipleship. Corinthians chapter 11, verse, sorry, 1 Corinthians 11 and verse 1. 1 Corinthians 11 and verse 1. Follow follow the example of Christ. This is Paul speaking. Sorry. Right, so yeah, I want to share this this part of the script because it highlights again how discipleship, or not discipleship rather, but how mentorship guides even those who are learned. So remember we have spoken about Apollos, Priscilla, and Aquila. Just after Apollos was speaking, he was actually having debates with certain persons speaking about body baptism. And after he was speaking to them, the Jews, he was taught after by Aquila and Priscilla, who put him like in a personal area and spoke to him and gave him guidance as to the understanding of the word. So he actually refined more of what he did. I want to mention this back in lesson, say I think lesson 1, right? And that would actually help him to sharpen his doctrine and have a better understanding of what he was teaching. So that would have helped him within his debate or towards speaking more of God and more of Christ. Right? So discipleship, well, not discipleship, but mentorship is basically stating that even though you are learned, you are not so learned that you cannot be yourself become mentored. And so mentorship, it plays an important or a very wide-ranging aspect of Christianity. And a lot of it also will come from those who believe that they learn. And a lot of it will also come from the ability to be humble as well. Right. Part of last week's lesson, what I want to mention is the accepting criticism or critique rather, to accept that hey, maybe you would have went about this the wrong way. Maybe you can just learn and look at the positive. You're trying to teach a person the right way, the positive way, and guide them accordingly. It's very important. And once you're involved in ministry or getting yourself involved in certain aspects, you should say in ministry, you have to be prepared to take the critique and also be prepared to be taught. Right? There's a popular saying that says, in order to be a leader, you have to first know how to be led. So I think the concept can apply for this. Right? This is understanding that even though you think or you believe that you have knowledge, you allow yourself to be taught still. Right? I'll change the screen. Sorry. Right. So key benefits for church growth, or there are key benefits for church growth rather. Right. This is an importance of mentorship and discipleship. There are key benefits for church growth. It helps persons to grow in spiritual maturity. It helps fulfill the Great Commission, Matthew chapter 28, verse 19 to 20. It helps to develop leaders, or it helps to develop leaders rather. It helps to build communities and accountability. So I was looking at how the church or how individuals would grow without the aspect of mentorship. So without mentorship, and I want to make sure that I have that we understand this part clearly, or that I say or put across clearly, is that without mentorship, guiding younger ones or even those who are learned, the church would still grow, but the way in which it would grow as good as it could. Right? So I'll try to explain that with some images. If you look at the image there, I'm trying to get the guy to look as much as me as possible. so, so this is without mentorship, right? Keep in mind. It kind of look like Brother Cohen to it. So what we're looking at is that without mentorship, there would still, if once you keep on doing God's work, once you keep on getting yourself involved in ministry, yes, there would be growth. Yes, it would be added to the church. Yes, it would be doing some. Uh, uh, you'll be doing some good towards helping the church to develop, right? There's no stopping that once as long as you are involved, right? It doesn't take away from the fact that things good or things developing would happen. That wouldn't stop at all. Right? But however, this is where the lack of following or placing that level of mentorship or guidance or helping in terms of having discipleship, in nurturing persons. These are the negative effects of it. This is what can happen. Right? There can be a lot of knowledge. They are very knowledgeable brethren within the church, right? Again, with both men and women. This is the importance of lesson one, and why I'll keep on stressing on it, that these lessons aren't just for the men, it's for the women as well. And we have spoken of how important it is for the women to be teachers and to guide. We mentioned that in Titus, I referenced that in Titus again last week, right, that your women play an important role, right? So that level of knowledge, without passing that knowledge on, or that experience on, or guidance, or that mentorship, there can be a loss of knowledge, right? Lots of opportunity to help the church develop. The church will develop based on your own working ministry, but it would lack a sense of succession planning. Succession planning is what I'll be looking at. I'll further down. And again, it would be that you will be fulfilling the will of God, which would have been, which I would have referenced in just so in 2 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 2. All right, so with mentorship now, that we brethren again. So it takes a different avenue or a different direction, right? So you'll be doing God's work, but instead of going in one direction, you're going in two directions now with that mentorship, right? So you're doing God's work, but you're simultaneously mentoring the young, right? That'll be your younger generation, while still fulfilling your duty, which is continuing ministry, right? And what that's going to do is develop the youths to add to the church. Now, the lack thereof, again, we say that it will take away. There's so much knowledge that will be able to be passed. There's so much preparation. There's so much building that you if we do not focus or we put more effort into that mentorship. So we're looking at so much of ministry, all these different aspects of ministry, but these are very important parts because we're looking to build the future of the church. And I personally, I don't know if I should be. I don't know if I might be sounding a bit biased because I'm so involved with the youths. I like to do things with the youths and plan for them and plan with them. But I believe that we should put more emphasis or more effort with the development of the youths and also the men and women who actually want to get more involved in church as well. We need to put that effort in, and, and you can see how much that it could help to develop the church. Again, and another aspect of that is, we'll be looking at future generations, and then now with the advent, I had mentioned this part, the advent of us acquiring the land and we're going to get the Belly Church. We really need to be looking at the future in terms of developing everything. And there are so many different ways in which you can do that. And there's so much opportunities we can look at in terms of that. So we see the importance of the mentorship. Right? Another aspect of it is that the lack of, and I didn't put this in the slides, but the lack of putting that effort into the mentorship or into the discipleship, if you want to call it that as well, is that we can lose souls. Souls can start drifting away. I remember seeing personal account of brethren who were youth who were involved in everything because I was involved. I was the group president in Point 14 years ago, and I remember that there was a family against I think it was 4 to 5 of them. That used to come almost everything youth group, and then I don't know where the distance where you just don't see them coming to church again at all. So it's like the entire family just stopped worshiping that. And then you look at there's a whole group of potential future leaders within the church. So you get to see how important the mentorship is, right? In that. And I'll show you how everyone can play a part in that in developing it afterwards. But it's important that we hold on to what we have, right? And to develop those youth because I don't see any of them again. And each time I visit Point 14, looking at the youth that used to come to the youth group on a Saturday, and I don't really see them again. I don't really see anyone worshiping again, right? Sorry. So moving on, I mentioned succession planning just now.
Before you move on, brother, I just want to make one point on mentorship. You know, a lot of us organize mentorship in such a way as working with the younger ones. But one of the key aspects of a successful mentorship program is the assignment. You see, if we have people assigned to people, you see, like how they lose that whole family there and nobody follow up. You see, if we have like assignment to certain individuals, for example, like an older one assigned to a younger one to work with them, if they cannot do it, they let somebody know so somebody else will be able to work. Because what happens is that a lot of things slips through divine because we assume that somebody else is doing it.
Good point.
And with the assumption of somebody else is doing it, nobody end up doing it. So if we have like assignment, right? For the younger ones, one of the things I do with the Sunday school when I working with them is that the older children, when we have like more difficult lessons to do, I assign them to a smaller one. So if I know they are there to mentor them and they are there to guide them and make sure they write the right answer, they put in the correct thing, they follow the right. So they just have one person to focus on. But assignment is very, very important. And I think that is one place where the church in itself, where we lack that level of mentorship, because that level of mentorship will never be able to progress if nobody takes responsibility for something, because we all sit and assume somebody else is doing it.
True. Thanks a lot, Sister Lisa. And actually, I mean, you're thinking on the right path because part of that you mentioned is coming up later in the lesson. So you're thinking on the right path. Thanks a lot. Apologies again.
Good night.
Just want to really.
Hi, good night.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just want to piggyback off of what Sister Lisa brought up there. I had a conversation with Sister Shanice, I think, a while now. Well, we had a discussion. One of the points that she brought up in the church where she goes, or where she used to go, I can't remember, she's still in that church, but she was saying what they do is there's mentorship, but what they have is, I don't know what the term she used, but it's sort of a partnership, because she said most of the time we look at mentorship as the older imparting knowledge to the younger. But what they have realized is that in the information flows both ways. In that the younger could provide information for the older, and the older person be open up enough to accept changes as the time go on also. So the information does go two ways, and you have both parties benefiting.
Okay. That sounds good. While doing the lesson, I actually did read something on that slightly. I think it had to relate to the young Christian, I guess navigating life and understanding. I mean, there'll be changes, with cultural changes, and younger ones would be facing things a little differently culturally, and how the older one would be teaching them or guiding them. But what the younger one is telling them how the culture is changing and how it could affect them. And I guess it's tutoring, I kind of tailoring their lessons more around what the youth could be facing. Right? I didn't really read all that much in that, kind of glance over it when I was doing the lesson, but I didn't really pull out as much. I didn't pull out any information to add to this. Right? But I followed most of it saying going on. I would have read some slightly on it to say. But the partnership, that is a good idea as well. Thanks for that.
Yeah, there was an experiment done where they had a nursery, a young children's class in a nursery, in an old people's home. This is in England, and they were able to see that from that there was passing of knowledge both ways, from the older generation to the younger generation. Right? They found that the older people live longer. They didn't need to take medicine as much. They had an interaction with the young people in change of ideas, like the young people ask them, like, what all do you still listen to in music? As the old people, they talk about records. The young people say we listen to MP3 music. So there's an exchange of ideas. They found out as well that as I said, the older people live longer. They didn't use their medication as much. They found out as well that the young people as well were able to cope with death better because they recognized that when the old people died in relationship, they were able to cope with that better. And there are several other things there. As I said, the exchange of information, culture. So it was really an experiment that they used and as a model that they used in England. You can look it up as well. I think I have the link for it. But is really important, this succession planning, and also the older people working with the younger people, right? Is really an important mix. Exchange of ideas and exchange of information and a whole sort of other things could be gleaned from that.
Okay. It sounds good. Honestly, it sounds. I don't want to say I think I get anxious thinking about it because anything to do with the development of the church, I am all in. Right, so I guess it's something we can look at, and I don't want to just say that, but be the one to actually try and start the initiatives in some way and look at some way to get into that. But thanks for that, brother. Yeah. Sorry. And so let's continue now. The definition of succession planning. Succession planning is critically important for churches as it ensures the continuity of vision and mission, provides stability during leadership transitions, and helps identify and develop future leaders. Without a plan, churches risk division, disruption, and a loss of purpose, especially during unexpected changes like a preacher's sudden departure. This is a big one. Just that last line, I don't know if that sounds a little bit familiar to any of y'all. But the preacher's sudden departure, how it will affect the church. So we look at just how bad or just how important the succession planning is, because you don't want, without proper succession planning, it can kind of leave everything going downhill, right? And I want to talk about the example of that. We can have a very real example, which is the unfortunate situation where we're taking place at Mission Road, where they kind of had to start to put things back in place, and then the effects of Brethren leaving too. That was actually a side note to what would have taken place that led to that downward spiral. Well, don't say downward spiral, that's a wrong term, but the negative effects that added to it. And that was an unforeseen negative effect too, where other brethren would have leaving, some leaders, right, would have left and gone to other congregations because of that. Right? We have youths, upcoming members of the body, right in Cunupia, we are youth upcoming brethren. It's very important that we hold on to them and mold them and guide them. And we don't want to lose them. And I would have stated earlier in the lesson, I would have seen that certain brethren just stop coming to church altogether. And I think it's the responsibility of the older ones, of the more experienced ones, to engage in that level of mentorship, because as a teen, especially, you are facing different things, or life is coming at you in different directions, and you're still trying to figure it out. I'm trying to figure it out without the foundation, or without, I'm not saying without the foundation, but without proper guidance in spiritually and biblically. You know, the more of that they have, the better they'll be able to stay grounded in the church. Right? I just want to share the screen for the final. I don't have a few more slides to go through. Sorry again. This lesson may be a bit short. Right. Just in the screen. Sorry. So you look at the benefits of mentorship and discipleship, the biblical benefits of it. Again, what I was just mentioning, it helps to ensure souls who are saved stay saved. Right? It's very important that even that we have the virgin who are there, that they stay involved, because it's very easy to get swept up in the world. And even those who this applies to not just the youth but also to the adults who new members who are trying to come into the church who are adults. And the fact that they make the effort to come into the church means that they are interested in trying to develop their life with Christ. And that responsibility falls on us to enforce ourselves within that level of ministry in terms of mentorship. Right? So we don't want that they come and we lose them for lack of showing enthusiasm to have to hold them into the body. Right? So it applies to both the adults who come in as well as the youth. Right? And of course, there's a mutual benefit. It helps those who are saved to stay safe, and also helps you as a mentor to continue to work. Now let's look at benefits of mentorship and discipleship physically. Again, it helps to prepare the future generations to take over the affairs of the congregation. And again, very important because you don't want to let the congregation have a gap in terms of having persons ready to take up responsibilities and different roles. You don't want to wait until it's the last minute, or we want to hold on to who we have and work on them as soon as possible. I know Brother Cohen engages in that in subtle ways, which I like. So it's not like it's a force, it's not being forced now, but it should be continued to encourage. We should continue to encourage actions like that. Brother Cohen, know what I mean by that? And it helps to reduce the effect of burnout. Important one. I know if you want saw that one coming, but as long as there's something that I was reading up on, so I didn't add it into the slides. But there's a term that they use that when I put it in open close quotation marks, that it's good to have a deep bench. What do you mean by a deep bench? Like when you play football, or when you have a football, you have a team, a substitute, people who can hold on. And you can pick on other persons that they can step up and do other things within the congregation, within the church, that someone falling ill, someone unable to make it, it doesn't affect the operations of the church. And again, it would not affect, sorry to use the example, but we saw how that will affect the other congregation, right? That they have people that can be relied on, and things will continue, and that God will continue, and that we continue to win souls and continue to do the work that God requires us to do. Right. Also, another brother to step up. To put this reference here for consider Brother Sergio. And if you'll, and I heard him say this a number of times, Brother Sergio, we stated that it's time for him to. I had the proper wording, but this just what he said. It's time for him to sit back and let us take up the mantle, or let us do the work. So you see where he actually alludes to the fact that it's not burnout, but the succession plan is important. And we can engage in proper succession planning without engaging properly in mentorship, into guiding those who can, do the work, or bring forward fruits towards the church and the congregation. Right? Sorry. So key takeaways for this lesson: mentorship passes down wisdom and experience. Very important. Discipleship builds Christ-like character and obedience. We want to engage in that because another part that's important to look at is that the aim is not just to bring in persons into the church, but to also help them to develop a Christ-like character, because bringing a person into the church and then they're not living accordingly, it can bring a negative light into the church, into the way that persons perceive the church. And then people can form negative opinions on the simplest of things, right? So there's the importance of discipleship to show others who we bringing us, others who we are raising in the church, to show them the importance of having a Christ-like character. both are relational, intentional, and biblical. So both the mentorship and the discipleship aspects are important, and they coincide with each other in different ways. But they all compound into making a good result at the end. Finally, the ultimate goal of both is spiritual maturity and the advancement of the kingdom of God. Very true. I'd say looking at practical applications in the church, establish mentorship programs. Sister Lisa, this is what you was mentioning earlier. We pay older, but mature believers with younger ones to offer wisdom. It doesn't have to be a vast difference in the age, but as long as the person is older and more mature. So it's kind of, if you want to call it it's not a mentorship, a body system, where that person continues to show that level of guidance towards them. I am not opposed to having someone older who is, giving me that guidance. And, it can even be a three-way. Since as someone older giving me the guidance, I give it someone younger the guidance. So, it goes down. So it doesn't have to be just two persons, but it doesn't have to be a pair, it can be one. Right?
Yes, brother. That is what I was talking about. But added to that is that you want like accountability and follow up. Sometimes you don't have that kind of relationship, but you want somebody to pursue the person. For example, like if they're missing, they will call them. If they have something that they want to question, they could come to them. More like a big sister, little sister, big brother, little sister, that kind of thing. Because what I found is that, yes, an accountability to be able to follow up on that person. To walk with that, it's more like walking with that person. Because one of the things I do in counseling is that I don't just counsel somebody to get rid of a psychosis, which is a problem. I counsel them so that they can cope with life struggles. So in case a problem like that comes up again, they can deal with it. So, you want them to be able to walk with the person in this life, like, more being accountable for them, for each other, kind of thing.
As I said that, and this thing goes a lot wider to us. I want to tell this too long, but while looking at, right, how would the person perceive feeling like you being the mentor? So like, say for example, I being the mentor, how would the person feel in terms of like, oh, what this person was feeling right, this person was feeling like that, no. Like that. I think there has to be certain levels of guidance, especially using scriptures to show that, yes, I hear what you hear, yes, I guide you, but it's not how to get them to accept it, how to get them to accept that what you are doing.
Right, like a friendship.
Not shoving it down the throat or not thinking that you're also right. Just it's really, it also always comes down to navigating and the right things to say and how to go about it too. I think that this is really the importance of your psychology comes into know how to, because different strokes for different folks and how to deal with different persons and personalities as well. It's I wouldn't go on that too long, but it's just food for thought. Know who you engage.
Right. It's more like forming a relationship, brother. You know?
You can say that again, sister. But you're not sorry for the noises on the throat and all that. Are you almost done? Right. Create small groups that focus on Bible study and prayer. Right. And add it to the smaller group that with the Bible study and the prayer, but we also focus on you can look at different targets, that different issues that are going through, and this is going through life that might be affecting the group, right? That might be affecting, like we pick a topic, especially if you center the group, it has to be a group that can relate to the topic. You don't want to have a mixed group in terms of adults and children or teenagers, because the adults might be able to relate with what the teenagers dealing with. So the topics could be on school violence, it could be how to be a Christian, how to stand out in situations like that, peer pressure and things like that, right? So when you're praying and you're focusing on the Bible, you're also correlating with that, you gain a better understanding with them. So even though there's, as the first part was stated in terms of pairs, there's also groups or group sessions that encourages the youth and or even the adults, if there's a separate group, with dealing with the situations that come up. How can we deal with this biblically? Can we deal with this spiritually? And also show them that, being into this level of ministry, that you are there for them. Right? So different topics, we can pick out on different weeks or different things that you can invite persons to speak on. Not make the the topics strictly about what you want to speak on, but invite others to bring up topics that would concern that particular group. And just something to think about, right? Mentorship, very important. To understand that. I think it's also good to help people to understand that that they could be playing a vital role in the future as well. Right? Again, not to put pressure on them, but simply guiding them along the way. Right? This goes to fathers as well as the youth. Right? And I'm sure we all know the importance of everyone training or developing someone. Right? So we all understand that this is a ministry that everyone can be a part of, whether you are a mentee or a mentor. It should be a ministry that everyone should be involved in some aspect, and that either the offering, well, everyone should have something to offer, but there should be a level of knowledge passed and a knowledge gained throughout this process. Right? So, we going through all these lessons, we're seeing so many different levels of ministry that it goes to show that ministry is for everyone. I think all the topics that would have been covered so far, I say this in a very humble way, Bridget. All the topics that have been covered so far, there is some way for someone to be involved or something that someone can apply, right? Just my opinion on it. Right, just in closing, just some food for thought, some closing thoughts. Who have we taught, directed, or mentored in Christianity thus far? Is the church developing without us or due to us? Due to what is the church going forward without us being involved, or is it being going forward or developing with our involvement? That is a very good thing to think about, and it would be put your Christianity into a retrospective to make you realize what you are adding or bringing to the church. Right, so this is important for ministry. We are all called for a purpose, and we all have spiritual gifts, and we all have something to offer to the kingdom. Right, our work for God is dependent on our will to make the church grow. Very crucial. An important part of this is mentorship and discipleship. Can we afford not to mentor and guide someone in the church? Right? Very key question as well. Right, so that being the closing of this lesson, I just want to look forward to next week's lesson, which is rewards for faithful service. And again, this is make getting involved in ministry impactful. Those involved would want to stay involved. Those who aren't involved should have a desire to be involved based on how fulfilling it is and the rewards that come after. So this is part of what next week's lesson will entail, right? And then from there, there'll be 2 more lessons, and that'll be to the end of November, and then I'll be handing over. So basically 3 more lessons before handing over. Right, so again, rewards for faithful service will be next week, Lord willing's lesson. Right, any questions, comments, anything to add before I hand it back over to Brother Ian? Sorry.